So as you guys all know, I've been covering the Kyle Rittenhouse trial from the jump. Instantly after the first shooting came out, I looked up Wisconsin state law. I explained why Kyle Rittenhouse should be exonerated based on his actions. You get this. We've been following this, covering this on this channel multiple different times. However, some of you out there have wanted me to respond to certain people who have been giving bad coverage, and we've also been doing that. But one of the people that you guys have wanted me to talk about is David Pakman. David Pakman is streaming the whole trial. He's making videos about the trial. And I think it's important to go over some of his videos because you guys really don't get a lot of Pakman from this channel. And in reality, he's just as bad as a bunch of these other lefties, even though he disguises it under this faux, reasonable, soft-talking method of delivering his biased information. Now, we're going to get into that. We're going to go on this diet of David Pakman. We're going to find the keto to what he's saying is wrong sponsorship transition, Keto with Justice. Keto has been in the news a lot in recent years. This is because thousands of people have reported better weight loss and better health due to the fact that they've been taking on keto. However, we on this channel have a bit of a secret weapon, something that literally nobody on planet Earth except for you listening to this right now actually know about. And that is the special keto power over at Keto with Justice. At ketowithjustice.com, we have a premium powdered version of the most ketogenic MCT oil called C8. It helps give you many of the benefits of elevated ketones without having to completely follow the rigid guidelines of the keto diet. Within weeks of taking this powder, users report 3 amazing side effects. The first is a suppression in appetite, which makes it way easier for you to lose weight. The second is more energy, so you're more emboldened to go on and take on the day. And third, users report having better mental focus. If you want to experience these fantastic benefits for yourself, don't sleep on Keto with Justice. Go to my custom URL, ketowithjustice.com, get yourself a very special Black Friday 51% off, and by the way, this comes with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Enjoy all the perks and benefits of the keto diet without the rigidity of actually going on the keto diet. ketowithjustice.com to get your order now. Now, we've known from the beginning that the evidence overwhelmingly is on Kyle Rittenhouse's side. If you look up Wisconsin state self-defense law, you will realize that Kyle Rittenhouse didn't even have a duty to retreat if you're not going to argue that he provoked the encounter. And if you are going to argue that he provoked the encounter, according to Wisconsin state law, it says clearly, even if you provoke an instance, if you retreat in good faith and give adequate notice, run away, then you have to exhaust all of your reasonable options before you can use deadly force. It is undeniable, unless you're a far-left nutjob, that Kyle Rittenhouse did that, and the fact that Joseph Rosenbaum, according to the prosecution's charging document, lunged for the gun twice. This makes Rosenbaum engaging in a deadly encounter. You can't go for somebody's gun, it's the most obvious thing about them, and not call that a use of potentially deadly force. A reasonable person in Kyle Rittenhouse's circumstances, when he runs away, when he points the gun to try to deter the person from chasing him, gets in between cars, has no way of escaping, and then the guy lunges for the gun, would have acted similarly in Rittenhouse. This is why the prosecution has gone with this weird argument that Kyle Rittenhouse should have dropped the gun and engaged in a karate fight with Joseph Rosenbaum.
As Mr. Binger said, he brought a gun to a fist fight. And he was too cowardly to use his own fist to fight his way out.
I guess he was also supposed to say, hey, Joey Rosie, can we agree not to grab the gun while we engage in this judo battle? We're going to karate chop each other. That's actually what the prosecution said in their closing statement. Ridiculous. And yes, I exaggerated it, relax, but he was saying there was a fist fight. Now, because there is no case against Kyle Rittenhouse, and people on the left wing have been lying constantly about the Rittenhouse case, they've been bringing up irrelevant information, like Kyle Rittenhouse crossing state lines with a firearm, which A, isn't even true, and B, if true, would not even be illegal. You're allowed to cross state lines with a firearm. Where they're getting that this is a crime, I have no idea, but it's repeated throughout the left-wing media. They've had to try to find new ways to explain why they're losing the case. And one of the most obvious, biased, nonsensical, left-wing misinformation campaign ways of explaining why they're losing is to smear the judge as some kind of right-winger. By the way, the judge was appointed by a Democrat. He's also the longest serving judge in the state of Wisconsin. His credibility should not be questioned, and he hasn't done anything out of bounds in this case. In fact, I've talked about multiple different times on this channel how his rulings actually favor the prosecution more than the mainstream media is letting on. We've talked about the criminal histories of Rosenbaum, Huber, and Gage Grosskreutz that are not admitted under the propensity evidence rule. Now, these people on the left wing want Kyle Rittenhouse talking on a video admitted, even though that's propensity evidence. If we're going to throw out the propensity evidence rule, obviously that's going to overwhelmingly favor the defense, not the prosecution, just based on the nature of the crimes in the background of the people that the state is alleging are victims, which, by the way, they're the aggressors in this situation. They're not victims. On top of that, they're not even allowed to admit that Joseph Rosenbaum had a felony. Like, I understand why you can't say Joseph Rosenbaum molested/raped 5 different boys aged 9 to 12, which is true, because the jury's obviously going to be biased with that information, and therefore they're not going to convict Kyle Rittenhouse just based on that. He killed a pedo. You see the reaction from people in the internet comments and everywhere. That's a thing. It obviously has an impact. That's why you can't include that. But the fact that Rosenbaum is a felony prohibited possessor, like, they don't even let you say that in the trial, and therefore he had no right to go for Rittenhouse's gun because it would have been a felony for him to possess that gun, is also not admitted. So the judge has been unbelievably fair, slightly tilting towards the prosecution, even though there's some big moments where the prosecution created giant violations that led the judge to lash out against the prosecution because they were violating basic law and potentially going for a mistrial in order to restart after their case fell apart on the stand. But David Pakman doesn't believe that. David Pakman doesn't acknowledge that. David Pakman doesn't know anything about law. And despite the fact that he's been streaming this trial, David Pakman doesn't seem to know the basics of what went on in the courtroom. But let's hear him talk about, in his moderate, reasonable voice, about how the judge should be like referees. And referees, when they're the story, that's a problem.
Judges, in a way, are like referees in sports. And if you follow sports, if you're talking about the referee, it's a problem, okay? If the story in a baseball game becomes the umpire and their ball and strike calls, it's probably because the umpire is at least theoretically doing something wrong because they're making their presence known. In a basketball game, if the biggest topic of discussion is the foul calls by referees, the referees they're doing too much and they're playing too big a role. It's probably not good.
Wow, what a great analogy. That honestly makes me think that David Pakman is totally reasonable on this. He said in the NBA and Major League Baseball, when you hear about the umpires and the referees, that's how you know this is not a fair game. That's how you know there's something wrong. And that's what's giving people the feeling, the fact that the referees are the stories. Not acknowledging that the left-wing media is making the judge the story so that they can attack it and then say that the trial is biased. So they're creating the problem with the referees, even though the officiating is totally fine, just so that they can have a story. Also, this is kind of undercut by David Pakman's original premise, this faux reasonableness, where he talks about how the Rittenhouse case shows us every negative aspect of gun culture.
This trial has become so toxic, where if you have anything but a completely black and white view on, if you have a black and white view on the matter, half of the audience flips out on you. If you have a gray area view of different aspects of the trial, then everybody ends up upset for the most part. I've already said, I believe that the entire Kyle Rittenhouse situation is a result of educational, parenting, and cultural failure in the United States. Some of the most disgusting aspects of gun culture, militia culture, vigilantism, etc. in the United States.
If the Rittenhouse incident condemns anything, it's not Second Amendment practices, it's not gun ownership, and it's not open carry. What it says about our society is that the Black Lives Matter narrative, lying about these police shootings, like the Jacob Blake case, which sparked these riots in Kenosha, is a big problem, and it has negative consequences, and that is almost entirely on the left-wing media. We know for a fact that the lies about Jacob Blake led to these riots. Jacob Blake, by the way, who is in violation of a restraining order against a woman who accused him of sexual assault in front of her child, fought the cops, tanked 2 tasers, had a knife in his hand and was about to flee with children he had no right to take. So this guy had an open warrant, he was a fleeing felon, and the police could not let him take off with the children, and they tried less lethal means against him before shooting him. The shooting was 100% justified. And the fact that the media put it out there that Jacob Blake was just breaking up a fight, the police weren't even called for Jacob Blake, when the 911 call said specifically, Jacob Blake is here. Like, they knew the police would know who he was, and they're like, the menace that is Jacob Blake showed up, and that's why they showed up to the scene to arrest Jacob Blake on the multiple counts, the open warrant, and the restraining order violation. So, the fact that the left-wing media lied about this, and this led to days of rioting in Kenosha, ultimately led to these activists attacking Kyle Rittenhouse, and Kyle Rittenhouse defending himself. So if it condemns anything, it condemns the lies of Black Lives Matter and the left-wing media. But yeah, David Pakman, let's talk about officiating.
I already went out last week. I went over last week when the judge, Bruce Schroeder, flipped out on the prosecutor Binger in the case, saying you were getting dangerously close to violating the Fifth Amendment when you started asking Kyle Rittenhouse during testimony about his the timing of when he is first giving his full version of events. You're sort of going after his right to silence and implying guilt there. And the judge kind of flipped out on the prosecutor, and people have their view about that.
So again, this is how you can hide you actually taking a stand behind this air of faux reasonableness. Going after somebody's Fifth Amendment right is a basic constitutional violation. You cannot do this in a court of law. This is obvious. Everybody knows this. They know this from the case that gives us the Miranda warnings, and that's what the prosecution was doing. So David saying, oh, well, you could have your own opinion on it, you could think about it, etc., that's nonsensical. The prosecution implied that Kyle Rittenhouse was in fact guilty because he was exercising his constitutional rights, which you are not allowed to imply makes you guilty in a court of law. Basic law, the judge was right to flip out on the prosecution for doing so, but David Pakman's like, you could have your own view on this. It's kind of up for grabs. The Fifth Amendment, is that even a thing in American law? I don't understand that. I'm David Pakman, but listen to my slow-talking, reasonable voice and how I say, I got some emails from people saying, look, the judge was fair in that assessment, but I don't know. You can make your own decision on whether or not the Fifth Amendment exists. David Pakman. Subscribe to the David Pakman Show. So what's great about this smear against the judge, and the left wing has been pushing this smear against the judge, and Dave Pakman reads all the left wing media, and he's trying to amalgamate this together in order to make the point, is that he really has nothing. He's about to talk about goofy things that the judge said about food or not going to the bathroom in the court, jokes that the judge told to kind of ease the tension of this trial that's been going on for over 2 weeks.
The judge is so wacky and cartoonish that people send me for my soundboard for when we broadcast the trial clips of the judge. First of all, there's the judge being obsessed with food. And so, for example.
By the way, how are the calzones? The food is here?
Yeah.
Let's take a break. Lunch is here. Pizza is here. But we have Subway tomorrow.
Okay. The judge at one point asking the jury not to go to the bathroom in the courtroom. Like literally, do not use the courtroom as your bathroom.
Whatever you do, make sure you go to the bathroom somewhere other than the courtroom.
No, David, that's not going to be enough for you to smear the judge. Sorry.
And in addition to that, the flipping out on the prosecutor, whether or not you believe the content of the flipping out was justified, many legal analysts have said when the judge flips out on the attorneys for one side, that is known to influence jurors. And thus, when the jurors see the judge flipping out only on one side, you could make the case that that is influencing the jury. Now, you could say, well, maybe the judge should be flipping out on one side. Fine. You send the jury out in order to do it.
And this is the major bit of misinformation in the David Pakman video. He talks about the judge flipping out on the jury. Now, Pakman has no case against the existence of the Fifth Amendment. He tried to make it ambiguous, muddy the waters on whether or not you could introduce evidence that the judge barred, because there was actually two reasons why the judge got angry at the prosecution. And now he says, okay, if you're going to say that the Fifth Amendment exists, if you're going to say that there's something called a Constitution and a Bill of Rights, and there's precedent around this, that's one thing. But don't flip out in front of the jury. Don't attack the jury or the prosecution in front of the jury, because that is known by the legal experts that David Pakman has talked to and read about, that influences the jury. But here's the thing, David. I know you've been live streaming the trial, but maybe you haven't been paying attention. Maybe you bailed out when your side, your political side, started losing in the trial. The jury was excused for this moment.
You've also had the opportunity to listen to the testimony of all 30-some witnesses that have testified in this trial so far, correct?
Yes.
And after all of that, now you are telling us your side of the story, correct?
Correct.
I'm going to ask you folks to go in the library for just a second. Please don't talk about the case. You need to account for this.
Your Honor, I don't want to jury here. He's commenting on my client's right to remain silent.
No, Your Honor. I am making the point that after hearing everything in the case, now he's tailoring his story to what has already been introduced.
The problem is, this is a grave constitutional violation for you to talk about the defendant's silence. And that is, and you're right on the borderline, and you may be over, but it better stop. Why would you think that made it okay for you, without any advance notice, to bring this matter before the jury? I was astonished when you began your examination by commenting on the defendant's post-arrest silence. That's basic law. It's been basic law in this country for 40 years, 50 years. I have no idea why you would do something like that. And it gives, I'll leave it at that.
This is undeniable that it happened. Obviously, the judge wasn't going to flip out in front of the jury. In fact, the whole issue the judge had was that the prosecution was bringing up these things in front of the jury. So when you bring up evidence that's not supposed to be distributed in front of the jury and you try to have this fight in front of the jury, that is wrong. That's what the prosecution was doing. The judge excused the jury. It's undeniable, but David Pakman, this is his big piece of the case. This is his judge bias, the judge referees bad, influencing the case, blah, blah, blah. The jury wasn't present. They weren't there. So David, what are you talking about? Why does this video have such a positive like to dislike ratio when a basic fact about the freakout, or if you want to call it a freakout, I think it's a justified excoriating of the prosecution trying to violate Kyle Rittenhouse's constitutional rights, was not done in front of the jury.
Prosecutor on cross-examination started getting into what exactly is Real America's Voice. And Real America's Voice is just a wacky right-wing channel. It's sort of like if Alex Jones InfoWars reporters are there, it would be very relevant for the jury to understand what is InfoWars. And when the prosecutor got to the question about what is the political leaning of Real America's Voice, the judge bails out the defense and says, you're not going to ask that.
So after David Pakman flubs his major piece of evidence, in fact, this video shouldn't exist. Once David Pakman realizes he was 100% wrong about that, he then talks about the cross-examination of Drew Hernandez. And he talks about the judge stepping in when the prosecution was going into territory that is not relevant at all.
Who pays you?
I am employed by Real America's Voice.
Right.
Real America's Voice?
Yes.
What is that?
That is a news commentary, breaking news website. They have their own apps and, website.
Other than getting paid by Real America's Voice, do you get paid by any other source to do your professional commentating?
No.
Is your Drew H Live website part of Real America's Voice?
No.
The things that you post on your website, Drew H Live, do you also share those with Real America's Voice?
Depending on what's going on where I'm at. But this is unrelated to what happened in Kenosha because I was not employed by Real America's Voice at the time.
That's something that's happened since then?
Yes.
And does Real America's Voice have any sort of political bias or agenda or anything like that?
What is the balance?
It goes to the bias of the witness, Your Honor.
Bias in what respect? I assume.
Now, the key point of this that's totally lost on David Pakman, who thinks he could say, it's like InfoWars, Alex Jones, therefore it's bad, therefore the prosecution should be able to ask questions about it.
So anyway, to cut to the end, the judge doesn't allow that to be asked about. And again, it's like if the witness were Alex Jones and you're not allowed to inquire about what InfoWars is. It's absolutely wild.
Is that Drew Hernandez was not employed by the media outlet that the prosecutor is trying to smear until after the Rittenhouse shooting. So this is a completely irrelevant line of questioning as he's trying to go to this guy's state of mind at the time of the event. He was attacking him for filming the riots and labeling them riots throughout his cross-examination in order to make him politically biased. And now he's trying to use associations after the fact, just like he did with Kyle going to the bar and taking those photos as if it's evidence. This changes nothing related to the case, and no matter how many times David Pakman, in his moderate, reasonable voice, says InfoWars, Alex Jones like InfoWars, and says it would be relevant that somebody like Alex Jones would be testifying, no, that's just not the case. Unless you can prove a pattern of dishonesty, and this guy has committed crimes of dishonesty, it is not relevant if you're trying to impeach the witness. You're essentially trying to say he's politically biased, therefore his footage doesn't show what it shows. He got a job at a right-wing outlet after the fact, therefore what he's testifying to, even if it matches his footage, doesn't show what it shows, and he's not saying what he's actually saying for legitimate reasons. This is not acceptable. This is not good behavior. This is not related or anywhere similar to other impeachings of other witnesses that were allowed by the judge throughout the trial.
And then lastly, a very strange comment, which some are saying is a political comment. One day they were having Asian food, as the judge says. And the judge made what some are calling a political comment by saying, hopefully the food's not stuck on one of those boats in Long Beach Harbor, alluding to this supply chain controversy. And of course, they're in Wisconsin, folks, so it's a completely unnecessary comment, but it's a joke that goes, some argue, to political bias.
Let's hope for 1 o'clock. I don't know. Hope the Asian food isn't coming. Isn't on one of those boats in Long Beach Harbor.
Now, even if he doesn't mean thanks to Biden, it's on one of those boats, it's off color and it's not appropriate. And the judge is very, very wacky.
Again, this just shows how weak the left's evidence against the judge is. By the way, this was what was deemed by the media a racist comment because he talked about Asian food coming from Asia, but he made a supply chain joke about the backlog in California. And David Pakman corrects the joke. He's like, they're in Wisconsin, not California. Thank you, Dave Pakman. We really appreciate that. Jokes are really funny when you have to explain them to people like they're idiots. But then again, your audience gave this a positive review, even though you're wrong about where the jury was when the judge yelled, even though the judge excused them, and you covered this live on your channel at the time. So yeah, the supply chain joke, joking about something in the news, does not denote political bias. Attacking Joe Biden is completely irrelevant. I mean, Joe Biden stuck his stupid nose in this when he labeled Kyle Rittenhouse a white supremacist without any evidence. But other than that, this is completely irrelevant. It's just a joke about food. And considering Dave Pakman played other jokes and comments about the lunch coming in from earlier in the trial as a way to say the judge is really goofy, it completely undercuts this final point. So what you see right here is what you've been seeing from the left-wing media. They lied to you about the contents of the video, about the Rittenhouse case. They ginned up all this hysteria about this rogue teenager attacking people, and now they see in the trial that Kyle Rittenhouse is going to be acquitted. Now they see that their lies might have some consequences because Kyle Rittenhouse was 17 when they started lying, and the standard for defamation is actually lower for under 18. So any statements against Kyle before he turned 18 are not subject to the stricter standard of defamation in this country. So they're backpedaling, they're weaseling out, and now they're trying to smear the judge, making him a story, and then complaining why the judge is a story. And in order to do this, they will just misreport facts, get everything wrong, as if they haven't already shown that their credibility is absent, and they should not be trusted as sources of information. David Pakman's whole premise, the basic argument, the only thing that actually could have held water and shown bias is based on him not knowing or not remembering that the judge did in fact excuse the jury. His coverage has been terrible of this trial, just like many in the left-wing media. This is them trying to bail out of the lies that they told repeatedly, and honestly, I'm not here for it. I'm going after it. I'm gonna do all these people, not really because there's so many of them, because of how ridiculous they are. You have no case, you never had any case, Kyle Rittenhouse is innocent. Hopefully the jury rules based on the facts, not based on the pressure created by the lying left-wing media, just like David Pakman. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, you show them by leaving a like. Subscribe for more content. Support me on my support links. Follow me on my social medias, including Instagram. Till next time.